Hi guys, this is Aki from Gimme Stream, that's GIMME space stream. We're a channel on YouTube that plays classic games throughout the early part of the week, so these are games that I've either missed out on or games that I'm revisiting, and then more newer stuff throughout the latter half of the week. And the focus of the channel is Japanese games and story-based games. Also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So yeah, please do check us out if any of that sounds good, and do just subscribe and share. Some of the stuff we've already got on the channel are The Last Guardian, Resident Evil Remake, Resident Evil Zero, and Resident Evil 7, which we'll be talking about later on actually a little bit as well. And then we've also got another game, but I can't remember what it is. Last Guardian. Um, yeah, and we've got Absu as well. So yeah, please do check us out if any of that sounds good to you. Also, this is a weekly show, so this is called Welcome to My Gaming News, or Gaming Issues even, episode 3. So this is basically a weekly show usually that we'll be looking at the news of the week through 3 different perspectives, which is the messaging perspective, the gamer's perspective, and the business perspective as well, or we'll consider them at least. Last couple of weeks though, because I didn't do an episode last week, there's not been massive amounts of news, I suppose. There's been some stuff, but nothing really sexy or anything that I had to really go into a lot of depth. But I'll tell you what's been going on anyway. But before we start off, some of you might be here to read the Resident Evil 7 review, or to know about the Resident Evil 7. Basically, if you've been following my page, the full game's up there, so you can watch all the gameplay as well on there, start to end. And yeah, so I've been playing it. It's been, to summarise, really, really good actually. I haven't played it in VR though, full disclaimer, I haven't played it in, but just out of interest as well, if any of you are interested. Capcom has actually come out and said that 10% of people have been able to play it in VR, or have been playing it in VR. But yeah, I think it's a pretty good game so far. To be honest with you, I want to try in VR as well, because I think it'd be quite freaking, quite scary, but I refuse to pay £350 for a headset just for one game. So yeah, some of the news that's been going on, or rather some of my thoughts on Resident Evil 7. To summarise, I'd say that it's a difficult game, but it's quite doable at the same time. It's harder than some of the other games in the past, but it's still really, really enjoyable. It's definitely return to form. There's puzzles, there's survival horror, there's scarcity of bullets, ammo, health, things like that. It's all there, even though it's changed perspective, but more on that later. Um, I'm not personally scared quite easily by horror stuff from games, videos, whatever you want to talk about, but even I found this game at times quite unnerving, and I absolutely loved it for that. It's basically based around a Baker family, so you're in a house, their house, and they kind of stalk you around and things like that. A little bit Nemesis-esque, a little bit Mr. X-esque from previous games. Genuinely quite freaky and unnerving. They do some great stuff with that family, and they will just appear out of nowhere sometimes and go for you. The other type of monsters that are in the game, aside from the family members, are these monsters that are called molded, which is similar to stuff that you might have seen in Resident Evil Revelations 1 in particular. I think maybe in 2 as well. And they're kind of like a cross between zombies and stuff, and a little bit more faster than zombies, and a little bit like wavy and stuff like that, a little bit jiggly, so to speak. But they're quite good. They add to the tension quite nicely. So the first half of the game, I will say, is definitely the stronger half of the game. Basically, throughout the first half of the game, you do have the Baker family more prominent, kind of following you around the mansion, appearing out of nowhere, making some scenes really, really tense to deal with. Like, I remember there was this whole part in the second floor of the mansion where Jack Baker, I believe is the father's name, and he'll be following you around, and you kind of got to try and evade him, because if you can't really get into a fight with him because you don't have enough ammo, but you're trying to evade him, but also try and pick up all the ammos without getting caught, and all the other items that you need from that area, and then trying to leg it back and evade him again, and keep doing this back and forth for quite a while. And it does add to the tension quite a lot, and it is quite interesting, quite unnerving again. But yeah, just this constant loop of, right, I'll enter this one room quickly, very quickly, try and get as much as I can out of it, leg it out before he comes after me, then try and hide from him, and then go back into that room and maybe just pick up anything that I've left off, and then do the next room, and so on and so on, which some people might find frustrating, I suppose, but I found it quite good and quite unsettling, and it really, really draws you in. Let's have a look. Oh yeah, so there's also some really interesting bits you might have seen before in some of the trailers and things like that. There's some videotapes, and basically you pick up a videotape, you insert it into a videotape player. No shit, I know. Um, and you basically watch this video. And what's quite interesting about these videos are it kind of sets a scene for something that you're about to do. So for the very first video that you watch, it'll tell you about a secret door, and then you go through the secret door. By the way, full spoilers. Sorry about this. Should have said this earlier. But you go through the secret door, and you'll go down a ladder, and some things will happen. And it's in the videotape. You'll see, the people who are basically in the video getting attacked and so on. And then you'll go and reenact that bit, and you're kind of like waiting for when you get attacked again, so to speak, and that kind of adds to the attention because like, is it going to happen now? Is it going to happen in about 10 seconds? And it really does make it quite interesting, quite unsettling, because you just don't know if you're even going to get attacked, let alone the fact that they could be just creeping up at any second now. So I suppose one of the things that I would have to say is there's not as many puzzles as I would have liked, but there's still some good puzzles, and the puzzles themselves are quite decent. However, they're a little bit on the simplistic side. So if that's one of the things I'd have to criticise it for, and this is on the simplistic side because in effect all you've got is an item and you've got to shine it in front of a light, almost like a shadow puppet, and get it to fit the shape that's on a certain pattern on the wall. And once you do that, that's basically the puzzle solved. So that's really more or less about it in terms of puzzles. They're really, really good. They're generally quite simple and they're quite interesting as well. But something maybe a bit more variety would have been better. But at the same time, they've done so much right. It's just a niggle for me in that game. You have 4 different bakers in that house. 3 of them are so you have 4 different bakers in the family. Just a little bit of spoilers again. 3 of them are actually bad ones, and one of them is not so much. One of them is actually talking to you throughout the game and kind of giving you tips about what to do and setting your objectives, so to speak. The 3 that are the bad ones, the Jack, which is the father, Marguerite, which is the mother, and then I can't remember his name now. Jake? No, it's not Jake. Jacob? Something like that. Anyway, you have a son as well. And yeah, they've all got quite different personalities. Like Jack is the more abrupt one, more the fierce one, more the angry one, more the lunatic really. Whilst Marguerite is kind of like the silent assassin who'll go around and kind of sneak up on you and try and freak you out that way. And then the son, he's just basically just there to try and torment you. And one of the great things actually that the son does do is one of the better puzzles in the game. I think maybe even arguably the only other puzzle aside from the shadow puppets. And you see it first through a videotape. And it's really, really clever what they do about this. Again, full spoilers on this one. You'll put a videotape in and you'll see you have to do a puzzle for the sun. And you basically have to get a candle from one room into another that's still on fire and you drop it in a cake. But in order to do that, you'll have to mess around with some items here and there, and in between the room there is like a shower that comes out which will turn off the candle. So you do all these puzzles and you eventually get to the other end. But what has happened is the very first thing you do in this videotape is you actually have to open like this key with a barrel. And once you open that key bit, you actually need the key for another part of the room, and the barrel starts to leak. When you eventually get this candle into the cake at the end, it blows up, and when it blows up, it actually sets what turns out is liquid, or flammable liquid on the floor, maybe alcohol, maybe oil, I don't know. But that's come from that barrel that you set up at the start. So you do this whole thing, and then by the end, it turns out that you've already kind of done something that's from that you've. It was almost pointless because you've already kind of created the problem in the first place that you're now having to deal with, and basically you die in the videotape. But then what happens is you've now got that knowledge inside you, and then when it's your turn to do it, you know what the puzzles are and what the answers are to an extent. So you can actually bypass that whole problem and just put the puzzle answers straight in and get through, put your candle in, and yeah, the same thing will happen. The cake will blow up, but this time there's no flammable liquid on the floor because you don't need to basically open that barrel in the first place. So things like that are quite interesting. It's constantly learning. The videotapes are really interesting because it's learning from what you've already seen almost, but doing things in a slightly different way. Which you think might get boring, but because there's only about 3 or 4 tapes in the first place, it's not particularly boring, but there's still enough variation within your scenario that it doesn't feel repetitive. Let's have a look what else I've got about it. Another gripe that I have about the game is the enemy variety is a little bit on the low side. So aside from the Baker family, who are, like I said before, are all great and absolutely fantastic, you have the molded, and there's only three type of molded anyway, and one's more along the more akin to the standard type of zombie. One is kind of akin to a liquor from Resident Evil 2, and one is basically like this really big guy. Also, there's two more. So there's one medium-sized big guy with a big arm, and then the one really big guy, which is kind of resembles the bloaters in The Last of Us. But ultimately, when it boils down to it, you pretty much have the same tactics for dealing with all four. They all have slightly different personalities, granted, and characteristics, but when it happens, you're almost always just trying to shoot them in the head and try and blow off the head and try and deal with them in the quickest way possible by doing that and saving your ammo. So that's my kind of gripe about that. But again, so much of the game was really strong anyway. It really didn't leave a sour taste in my mouth. Um, so yeah, I would say the second half of the game isn't as strong as the first half. It's still pretty decent, but basically the reason why it's not as strong is you've kind of almost dealt with most of the Baker family by that point. So it kind of slows down a little bit. You don't have this creeping nemesis or Mr. X or some kind of stalker throughout the game. And that's why it's not as tense and it's not as unnerving as the first half of the game. But again, it's still really good. One thing that I was surprised about is how well the game actually works in first person in the end. They've experimented with this before in previous games and it's always been a little bit miss. But this is actually the time where it actually has worked really well. Really puts you into the action. I kind of want to play it in VR because I've tried VR before and I just know that you can get completely enveloped in it. So being first person in that sort of environment will be quite unnerving. But by being first person, it hasn't taken away from the franchise. It's something that might arguably shouldn't have worked very well for them because this is a company that always does third person games when it comes to Resident Evil, or mostly third person games when it comes to Resident Evil. Yet it's still surprisingly worked out quite well for them. You do really feel the tension. There is very little barrier, and it works better for it. So yeah, to summarise really, I'd say it's a really good game. There are a couple of issues. I think if they did a part two, in the same format, I think they'd fix a lot of these issues. But the issues, they're not prominent enough to say that the game's bad in any shape or imagination. It just could have been slightly better, but it's still a fantastic game, and I really recommend it. And most importantly, it's return to form. I personally am very happy with this. I've been a Resident Evil fan for a long time. And after games like 5 and 6, and even though 4 was a really good game, let's be honest, 4 was also the reason why 5 and 6 was such a mess. But to find something that is clearly probably on a bit of a budget, but still very clever and has so many the feelings and evokes the same type of emotions that the early games do, is just fantastic as for me as a fan. So I can't highly recommend it enough. Granted, could have been better, but still really good. Okay, so let's move on to the news segment. So we've got a couple of weeks of news here, but a lot of it isn't anything particularly depthy to get into, I suppose. So the first piece of news that I've got is from Nintendo again, because Nintendo likes to attract all the attention these days with the Nintendo Switch. So you might have heard that you have to pay for online this time, and the online is quite interesting because they've been a bit dodgy with some of the stuff that they've been saying. It's like, oh, you pay for online, but you have to use an app to do the talking. That's a smartphone app, by the way. You can't just do it straight through the Switch. You'll pay for online. You won't get free games as you do with Microsoft and PlayStation, or Sony with PlayStation even, where you get 2 free games per console per month. What you'll actually get is 1 free game from a NES or a SNES game. So, we're talking about games that are quite far back, but then at the end of the month you have to give it back. And basically probably to try and entice you to kind of pay for it again, if I'm honest. But what's interesting, however, is was those charge about £40 a year. Granted, you can get it cheaper from CD Keys and other websites like that. But what's interesting is here they're saying in Japan anyway that it's going to cost roughly the price of a 3DS game. So we're probably talking about somewhere in the region of £20 or £30. So yeah, okay, it's not as feature dense as the others. You don't get a discount and things like that, but it's also significantly cheaper. I'm still not happy about the whole giving up your free game, so to speak. We'll see how it works out. I'm still open to it. I suppose at the end of the day, it is cheaper, but it seems a bit of a weird one to do. Also, speaking of the app, I find it a little bit annoying and a little bit ridiculous that you have to use an app to be able to talk to people. Via a smartphone app. I have a feeling the reason that they've done this though is actually because of children, because Nintendo's always been the family-friendly console, and granted a lot of their games are quite hard and are aimed at adults, but they still are always about making the family inclusive. I have a feeling that the reason that they've done this app in this way in particular is to kind of stop people from, or really to stop children from hearing, the chat going on, because as adults, let's be honest, we are going to swear and stuff like that. So I think it's really to stop the children from being able to hear that, and that's why they're probably doing it from the smartphone way. That's my personal opinion. However, maybe there's always that chance that there's maybe some of the tech that's missing needed for a proper chat system, or they're trying to put all the power into the actual games to run properly. And by doing that, it's basically meaning that that power isn't available for chat options and so on. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. I suppose we'll see how it works out, but I'm a little bit skeptical on it. So some piece of news that I'm actually quite gutted about, if I'm honest with you, is that Deus Ex is now on hiatus, as they call it in America, and basically what it means is that there's not going to be another Deus Ex game for the foreseeable future. I'm really gutted about it. I absolutely love the last couple of games, Mankind Divided and Human Revolution. I love the artwork, I love the feel, the environment. Stories are pretty decent for the most part. It's just a shame that basically this is happening, and they probably won't see a Deus Ex game for at least another, 7-8 years, maybe even more. But I think the real reason is because of this other piece of news, because the same company that makes that is making a new set of games for Square Enix, which is called the Avengers game. So they've done a deal with Disney and Marvel to basically make a series of, and they're calling it multi-games, but we don't know what the other games are. The only one that they've confirmed so far is Avengers. However, I believe it's Kotaku, correct me if I'm wrong on that one, who have found out that supposedly one of the teams at Crystal Dynamics, which is also, by the way, a developer for Tomb Raider, Deus Ex, and Hitman, as part of IDOS as well, that they're also supposedly working on the Guardians of the Galaxy game as well, so Avengers will be first and Guardians of the Galaxy next. I think this is probably the real reason why we're not also seeing a Deus Ex game. The game's probably sold fine enough, probably happy enough with the sales, but when it ultimately boils down to it, do you have the team, if you've got limited resources, do you have the team developing the Deus Ex franchise, or do you throw that same team, who are credible enough, behind these Marvel games, which even if the games only turn out to be so-so, you're still going to make more money from it. And that's basically probably what's happened, is they're throwing this team to go make these Marvel games, hopefully really good Marvel games, but even if not, they'll still make decent amounts of money from them. However, it's Crystal Dynamics and it's Square Enix, they generally have a good track record. And Kingdom Hearts, even though that's not from Crystal Dynamics, but that is from Square, shows how they can actually merge Final Fantasy with Marvel, or not Marvel so much, but with Disney, a completely different type of franchise. Merge them two worlds together and actually do a pretty decent job of it. So because of things like that, and again because of Crystal Dynamics' track record, I think potentially these games could be quite good, but it's obviously too early to tell, but there's that potential there. And I suppose it's watch this space kind of thing. So some of the kind of creative, funky pieces of news that are like pretty cool. By the way, I've also posted a couple of pictures of these on the Instagram account, which is GimeStream, GIMME space stream. And basically you can see a couple of these pictures, but there's also more on the internet that you can have a look at as well. Funko, as in the company that makes the Funko Pop toys, have been looking at and are going to be releasing some more Funko Pops for 3 different gaming franchises. So the first is from Mass Effect. I believe you're going to be able to get the main characters, but also you'll be able to buy an Asari, for example. I can't remember her name, I think it's PB or something like that. But you'll be able to buy an Asari in Funko Pop, which looks pretty darn cool. What's quite exciting for me is the Tekken franchise is also going to get a few Funko Pops. You'll be able to buy Hihachi, Jin, and what looks pretty awesome to me, King. King looks absolutely fantastic, with all his with all his kind of like leopard print sort of style all over his face and things like that. It looks really, really good, so I really recommend checking that out. And that's on the Instagram account as well. I also saw a headline this week related to the Funko Pops, which made me so excited and then ended up being a bit of a disappointment. I mean, they still look pretty cool, but Kingdom Hearts are going to be having Funko Pop toys, but the why I got so disappointed is it's not going to be Sora or any of the main Final Fantasy-esque type characters. It's actually going to be all around the Disney ones. And they all look really, really good, don't get me wrong. I just wanted Sora, I suppose, which is a bit of a disappointment, but you'll be able to get Mickey and Donald and Goofy and Pete and some of the other Disney characters, and they all look really, really good, all decked out in their typical Kingdom Hearts fantasy clothes. Again, check out pictures for that. A bit of Final Fantasy 15 news. Gladiolus DLC, I believe, is coming out in March, but I'm not 100% sure on that one. However, what's interesting is the director, I haven't gotten as far as this, but apparently Chapter 13 is a bit of a mess. There's not really much that you can do. You lost quite a lot of your powers in that game from what I understand. The director notices that it's a bit of an issue, and basically in an upcoming patch they will be sorting that out and making it a little bit better and a little bit more fluid. So that's quite interesting as well. And yeah, the Gladiolus DLC is out. Is going to be the first piece of properly paid, I believe, DLC. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Just a side note as well, you might have seen some pictures for a Magitech armor, as they're calling it, more commonly known as the 4 Power Rangers. And I say that because that was going to be a free piece of DLC that was actually due out soon. But everyone on the internet kept comparing it to Power Rangers. And what, sorry, I thought I heard something. And what has ended up happening is basically it sounds like they may have had a call from Power Rangers themselves to basically say this looks too similar to us, so you shouldn't really do this. So they're going back to the drawing board and actually going to change all pieces of armour, and then they're going to release it. So that's been delayed for now. So due to copyright issues. Just a couple of other things. I've been playing Yakuza 0, 2.5 hours of chapter 1 of that game is up on my page, so you can check that out as well. Never played a Yakuza game before. All I knew about this franchise was that it's a brawler and it's supposed to be really, really good. Very, very Japanese focus, obviously, with it being Yakuza, as in the Yakuza mob. So I played 2.5 hours of it. The story so far, from what I've seen, is very, very gripping, very, very interesting. And even though it's in Japanese audio and with English dubbing, the Japanese actors are very, very good. And they really, really do draw you in, and they're quite endearing in a way, even if some of them are quite bad. So it's really, really, it seems like it's going to be a fantastic game. I'm kind of gutted that I waited so long to play them. It's supposed to be a really good place to start in the franchise. Yakuza 0 is. Check out my video if it seems like it might be your kind of thing, or if you're unsure. So far from what I'm playing, I'd really recommend it, but it's still a little bit too soon to tell if it's a good game overall, because I've already played the first chapter of the game. Even if it is a substantial amount, it's still not enough to kind of suggest if it's perfect. But yeah, check out the video, see if you like it. And do share your thoughts on the game if you have been playing it, because I really, really like it and I'm quite pleased with it. The fighting style kind of feels a little bit like what you got from the Rocksteady's Batman games, i.e. the Arkham trilogy. It's quite a little bit free flowing and you jump about a little bit. Not as good as that, not as free flowing as that, but still pretty decent within its own right. And you have these different play styles, so you can have a brawler play style or what I personally prefer so far is Rush. And basically the brawler's a little bit slower, but a little bit more powerful, whilst the Rush, obviously, as you can imagine, is weaker but a lot faster. So it's kind of playing to your own play style a little bit there. I haven't read too much of this, so another piece of news, but Glixel, which is a website and it does gaming news, has quite an in-depth review of Kojima, or with Hideo Kojima, i.e. the guy who is the director of Silent Hill games, PT, and most importantly, Metal Gear Solid franchise. So yeah, the interviews up on their website. From what I've seen a little bit of, it was quite interesting. Talks about his experiences in the past and also how he's trying to use those experiences to mold his new game, that's Death Stranding, that's eventually coming out, but we don't know very much about it, so it'll be quite interesting. There's also been some beta testing going on, beta testing even, as we Brits like to call it, of the PS4 OS update or operating system update. one of the features that's on it is a boost mode on the PS4 Pro. And basically, one of the issues with the PS4 Pro was some of the older games struggled to work on it or do not work as well as it did on the original PS4. The boost mode is basically to try and rectify that issue. The biggest piece of news that I've heard so far from this is that the actual update is going to let you put external hard drives in. I wonder if this is really just to compete with Microsoft and what they've been doing, and in a way a little bit Nintendo as well, because the Wii U can let you support external hard drives. Maybe their thought was, we've done so many of these other more exciting, more sexy features. So let's now do this one that is a bit of a gripe for a lot of people, and it'll also make us look better against Microsoft, and then hopefully we won't lose out on sales compared to Microsoft. Just because of something like that. Because while Sony has always let you change the hard drive from the inside, which I understand is not particularly hard to do either, some people might be afraid to do that or don't want to actually rip up the inside of the console and things like that. So maybe this is just kind of breaking down that barrier and making it a little bit more friendly for people, which might increase sales for them slightly. Don't know though. Yeah, so I think as well the reason that it's come about so late is because they've been using resources to build these extra newer features that are more important to them, and now they've things are slowing down a little bit so they can put the resources on something like this. There's also going to be a revamp a little bit to the quick start menu as well. So yeah, check any of that out as well. If that sounds good to you, hopefully that'll be out soonish so we can find out properly what's going on. But there's also videos leaking out on the internet about what's going on there with it. Another piece of news from the Nintendo Switch is in the UK they've started a tour. I think it's mainly during February. It's just 3 cities though, which is a bit of a disappointment. The base is Birmingham, Manchester, and London. There's a place there basically that you can go and check it out, and I think each place is going to have it for 3 days: Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And you can go and play out the Nintendo Switch there with a few games, and that's about it really. I know about it. So I've already talked about the Magitech Hammer. So yeah, I suppose some of the things I'll just talk about my page again a little bit more, my channel even. Upcoming, my classic game that I'll be playing on. Still a little bit of a toss up. Can't quite decide what I want to play. It's either going to be Mass Effect or Rogue Galaxy. Rogue Galaxy is a game I've never played before. But I've heard many good things about it, and it's from a great developer, i.e. Level 5, who do some of my favourite games. But Mass Effect, I kind of want to play that as well a little bit before the new one comes out next month, so I might actually play that one instead. In terms of the modern day portion, I am playing Yakuza 0. So first chapter's already up on that, and latter half of the week I'll be putting next chapter up on that as well. And finally, just before I go, I'll talk you through my channel again. So we're a channel that plays Japanese games, single player games, and story based games throughout the week. The first half of the week is more focused towards classic games, so these are games that I'm either revisiting or games that I missed out on, and then the latter half of the week is more modern stuff. Also today, later on today I'll be streaming Virginia, but again that'll be up on YouTube afterwards as well, so you can just watch that. Hopefully I'm just going to play it in one playthrough, so the whole video will be up like I did with Hapsu. So sort of modern stuff throughout the latter half of the week. Also once a week I'll be doing a video podcast, and the video podcast is based around the gaming news of the week, and I'll also be considering things through the messaging perspective, the marketing perspective, the business perspective even, and the gamer's perspective. So if any of that sounds good, then please do check us out, and please do subscribe and share. Thank you very much for tuning in. Take care, guys.